Thank you all. Let me walk through a couple of things, and I'll be the final question, then we'll take a short recess after this for the votes, and then come back and maybe we'll finish up. So let me walk through about 5 minutes or so of some brief questions. General Lowell, thank you for your service and for all of you and your service and your research and everything. I want to be able to ask just a couple of quick questions. Based on what you were watching that night, do you feel like the United States was doing everything it could do to protect the people, its facilities abroad? That the United States was doing everything it could do to protect our people and our facilities abroad, based on what you saw that night?
No, sir.
Do you believe that night, and even during that night, did you believe that this was a protest rooted in an Internet video?
No, sir.
Did you have any sort of sense that night, based on what you were hearing, the communication between State and DOD and what was happening on the ground, trying to gather information, that there was a steadiness and a strength through that evening in trying to make the decisions?
There was a bit of there was definitely a strong desire to come to decisions. There was a period of time where gaining an understanding of what was needed from folks on the ground, because we didn't have a lot of insight. And
so was there ongoing communication and coordination? Were you spending time waiting on the State Department to try to get you information?
There was a lot of back and forth, yes, sir.
Sure, it's a chaotic moment, no question for that, but you feel like there were clear lines of communication and a steadiness of leadership that was happening that night, so there was a consistent, here's who's in the lead, here's what we're going to do, and a plan that was unfolding?
It was continually strived for. In that room, we were looking back to the United States for more information.
Were you getting it from the United States? In the room they were planning and strategizing, were you getting clear communication and leadership from Washington and from the United States of what to do next?
My observations were that they were still looking for more decisions.
Does anyone know if we brought the people to justice that did this in our embassy and our facilities? Is anyone aware of justice that's been carried out?
We have not.
Sorry.
So the 4 things that I just walked through were the 4 talking points that were presented by Ben Rhodes, saying these were the areas that we're going to talk about when we go on the Sunday shows. All 4 of those things we knew in the initial days are not true, and we are still waiting for this statement that came out from the beginning. We will take these individuals to justice. 2 years later. So the 4 things the White House put out, 3 of them are factually not true, and 1 of them was a promise that is still unkept. What were you tracking that evening? Were you watching video? Were you tracking phone calls? How were you gathering information through the course of the evening?
Obviously, there were national means being used to gain intelligence. There were the actual communiques that we received either directly or indirectly from individuals that were on the ground.
So you're talking the email traffic and such, or when they're trying to email out and get information?
They work through chat, yes, sir.
Correct.
And then the analysts work through chat. And then in addition to that, the operational channels do the same thing. We also had pred feed at a certain point in time. We were able to swing a bird over there and then relieve that and gain more. That was unmanned UAV.
Then there's phone conversations happening at different points where the individuals on the ground are in phone communication with other individuals. Were you getting any information about that as well?
We knew that we would have information filtered back to us, yes, that people on the ground were back in communication.
Okay. Were you aware there was closed-circuit TV that was also on the compound itself, video feed?
No, sir, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. There's video feed of that night that's fairly extensive, both leading up to the event, that you can actually look down the street and see that there's no protest going on the street, and you can actually see the actions on the compound and be able to go through that. So that video, obviously, you didn't have a feed to it, weren't able to track, but that closed-circuit TV does exist, as well as the Predator feed that you're dealing with as well. So all this information is gathering and trying to walk through this. Then you're trying to make decisions, and you're in the process of all these decisions being made and trying to gather all this information to be able to give advice to what was going to happen. did you get from State, or let me say it this way, did you know who from State would call you if they wanted to take action? Was there a clear line of communication? Okay, the military is getting into a position of readiness. Who are you waiting for from State to call you?
Those calls would go back through the operational chain of command. So those people that were engaged were back in Washington, D.C. General Ham was dealing with that, as well as Admiral Leidig.
So there was a clear line of communication. You knew who would make the call and where that would come from as far as
those gentlemen would be in contact with people. We would hear back at that command center from at my level, from a military authority to do something.
Okay. Did we have Americans back that night?
Sir?
The United States military always watches for other Americans and their back. Did we have their back that night?
Obviously not, sir.
Based on the situation in Libya now or 2 years ago, would you consider the security situation normal for one of our facilities? Was this a normal security situation? Prior, obviously when the attack is going on, that's not normal. Prior to that attack, was this in a normal environment for our personnel?
No, sir.
Does anyone else have a comment on that? Was this a normal security environment?
It was not a normal security environment.
I've heard over and over again from the State Department there was a push to normalize security and actually withdraw individuals that were our own, that were Americans, to provide security and to put in country security folks, which is typical for us, that we have a larger force in our embassies and facilities that are provided from in-country. We had a militia watching our front door from Libya. So the front door of the facility, a local militia was actually providing the security for it. Just a quick question for anyone. If you went to Libya right now, would you be okay if one of the local militias guarded your front door? Would anyone be open to that?
With all due respect, that's the way security is functioning in this country, and I think.
No, I understand.
Yes, I visited Libya.
Was it a normal security environment that we would run it with one of the local militias? I understand local security is typically provided in Libya at that point where we're in a normal environment that we would have one of the local militias. Would you trust their loyalty at that time to provide your security for your front door?
As a matter of embassy protocol, I would make sure that they're vetted. I mean, that they're loyal. But I mean, this is the nature of Libya right now. These militias consider themselves the army. There is no army.
Could you vet the militia at that time based on where we were?
I don't know. I wasn't there, but I mean,
just your guess.
I mean, this is the challenge that we have in this country. Is there is, as I've mentioned, there was no central army. So
correct. So you would assume if there is no central army, then we're not going to try to normalize the security situation. It's not normal. The British have already been run out based on an attack on their facility. The Red Cross has already been run out based on an attack on their facility. Instead, we reduce the number of gun toters and American gun toters and increase local militia that we can't vet.
From an embassy standpoint, it is highly, I would say, risky. I'm saying from my own perspective, traveling to Libya, you can go and feel relatively safe because these militias, as Dr. Shaki mentioned, they do provide a sort of neighborhood watch program. Many of them are filling the void of the security forces. So I think we need to look at how we use the term militia very carefully because these are the groups that are, for all intents and purposes, the security forces in the country.
Right. But 2 years ago, it was not normal in a situation. It was as dramatic or more dramatic than it is now and insecure. No way to be able to vet people, unknown on that, and yet we reduced the number of American folks that are providing security and increased local folks that we did not know how to vet. They were watching our front door, and it's now clear. They walked away from the front door, and we had Ansar al-Sharia walk through the front door that they walked away from, and the attack was on. So with that, let me take a recess. We're going to move towards votes, and then we'll be able to come back and be able to visit again. So we'll stand in recess until the